The morning sun cast long shadows across the pasture as Thomas guided his horse along the fence line. At 63, he'd walked every inch of this ranch more times than he could count, knew every tree, every rock, every berry bush that dotted the property his grandfather had bought in 1947. This land wasn't just soil and grass. It was memory, legacy, blood. He spotted her from a quarter-mile away. A figure in a faded blue dress, bent low near the wild blackberry thickets that grew thick along the old creek bed. His jaw tightened. This was the third time this month someone had trespassed. Last time it was teenagers drinking beer by the water. Before that, a photographer who thought the rules didn't apply to him. Thomas urged his horse forward, rehearsing the speech he'd given a dozen times before. Private property. No trespassing. Please leave. But as he drew closer, something made him slow down. The woman wasn't young. Her hair, pulled back in a simple braid, showed more silver than black. Her movements were careful, methodical. She was picking berries one at a time, placing them gently in a small wooden basket. "Ma'am," he called out, keeping his voice firm but not harsh. "This is private property." She straightened slowly, one hand pressed to her lower back. When she turned to face him, he saw a woman in her late 50s, maybe early 60s. Her face was weathered but kind, with lines that spoke of laughter around her eyes. Those eyes met his without fear, without guilt. Just a quiet sadness that caught him off guard. "I know," she said simply. "I'm sorry. I can leave." She didn't make excuses. Didn't pretend she hadn't seen the signs. Didn't act entitled like so many others had. Something about that honesty made Thomas pause. "You know it's private, but you came anyway?" he asked, dismounting. His knees creaked as his boots hit the ground. Getting old, he thought. Aren't we all? The woman looked down at her basket. Maybe 2 cups of berries sat at the bottom. Hardly worth the risk of trespassing. "Yes, sir. I know it was wrong. I'll go." But she didn't move. Not right away. Instead, she looked past him, toward the rolling hills beyond, and something in her expression shifted. Recognition. Longing. Love. "Have you been here before?" Thomas asked, curiosity replacing irritation. "A long time ago," she said softly. 52 years, to be exact. Thomas studied her face more carefully now. There was something familiar there, though he couldn't place it. 52 years. That would be 1972. June of 1972, she confirmed. "I was 12 years old. My family rented the small house that used to sit over there." She pointed to a spot about 300 yards east, where nothing remained but a concrete foundation and some scattered bricks, slowly being reclaimed by wild grass. Thomas remembered that house. His father had rented it out to workers, families passing through, people who needed a place to land for a while. It had burned down in 85. Lightning strike. "Your family worked here?" he asked. "My father did. Miguel Santos. He helped with the fencing that summer, some repair work. We were only here 3 months before we moved on. He followed work wherever it took us." Her fingers absently touched the berries in her basket. But those 3 months, this place, they mattered. Thomas waited. There was more to this story. He could feel it. "I had a brother," she continued, her voice growing quieter. "Daniel. He was 8 that summer. 4 years younger than me, and my whole world. Our mother died when he was born, so I'd helped raise him. Fed him, taught him his letters, made sure he brushed his teeth." A small smile crossed her face. "He drove me crazy the way little brothers do, but I loved him more than anything." Past tense. Thomas noticed it immediately. "What happened to Daniel?" The woman's eyes glistened. "He got sick. Really sick. High fever, terrible cough. My father was terrified. We had no insurance, barely any money. The nearest hospital was 40 miles away, and our truck was broken down. He was going to die. I knew it. I could see it happening." She paused, swallowing hard. Thomas found himself holding his breath. "Your father," she continued, "he came by to check on the work. Found my dad beside himself with worry, found Daniel barely conscious. He didn't hesitate. Not for a second. He scooped up my brother, put him in his truck, and drove him to the hospital himself. Stayed there the whole night. Paid the entire bill. Thousands of dollars. Never asked for it back. Never even mentioned it again. Thomas felt something catch in his throat. That sounded like his father. James McKinley had been a hard man in some ways, stern and unbending about work and responsibility. But he'd had a soft spot for kids, for anyone weaker or hurting. The doctors said if he'd arrived an hour later, they couldn't have saved him, the woman said. Your father gave my brother his life. And your brother? Thomas asked gently. Is he? He's alive, she said, and now tears did fall, tracing clean lines down her dusty cheeks. He's a doctor now, a pediatrician in Phoenix. Married, 3 kids, 2 grandchildren. He saves children the way he was saved. All because your father cared about a poor Mexican kid he had no obligation to help. Thomas had to look away for a moment. His eyes burned. He'd lost his father 8 years ago. Thought he'd cried all the tears he had. But hearing this, imagining his dad making that desperate drive through the night, saving a child, changing the entire trajectory of a family, it opened something in his chest. Why didn't you just knock on my door? He asked. Why sneak out here to pick berries? She smiled sadly. I drove 3 hours to get here. I wanted to see the place again, to remember. When I saw the blackberry bushes, I remembered how Daniel and I used to pick them. We'd eat until our fingers were purple and our stomachs hurt. They were the best thing I'd ever tasted because they meant we were staying somewhere long enough for fruit to ripen. They meant, for a little while, we weren't just passing through. She held up the basket. I wanted to bring some to Daniel. He lives 4 hours south of here. I'm driving there today. It's his birthday. His 60th. I wanted to bring him berries from the place where he was given a second chance at life, where someone decided he mattered enough to save. Thomas wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. He wasn't ashamed of the tears anymore. What's your name? He asked. Maria Santos, she said. Well, Maria Reeves now. I married 40 years ago. Maria, he said, I'm Thomas. James McKinley was my father. Her hand flew to her mouth. I thought maybe, when I saw you ride up. You have his eyes. That same look, like you're measuring the world and finding it mostly decent. They stood in silence for a moment, 2 people connected by an act of kindness performed half a century ago by a man who'd never mentioned it, never sought recognition, never asked for thanks. Come with me, Thomas said finally. He led her to his horse, retrieved a large canvas bag from the saddlebag. Here, let's get your brother some proper berries. For the next hour, they picked together. Thomas showed her the best bushes, the ones heavy with fruit, sweet and ripe. They picked until her small basket overflowed, until the canvas bag bulged. They picked and talked. She told him about her life, about Daniel's kids, about the journey from that small rental house to a good life built on hard work and the grace of strangers. He told her about the ranch, about keeping his father's legacy alive, about the weight and joy of tending land you love. When the sun climbed higher and the heat grew thick, they walked back toward where he'd left his horse grazing. Maria's arms were full of berries. Her face was full of peace. Thank you, she said. You didn't have to be kind. I was trespassing. My father taught me that property lines matter, Thomas said, but people matter more. I just forgot for a while. Thank you for reminding me. Before she left, he walked her to her car parked discreetly off the main road. From his wallet, he pulled out an old photograph, creased and faded. His father standing in front of the barn, squinting into the sun, a slight smile on his weathered face. Would you take this to Daniel? He asked. So he can see the man who saved him. Maria took the photo with trembling hands. He'll treasure this. We both will. One more thing, Thomas said. You're welcome here anytime. No sneaking required. Every June, those berries ripen. Every June, you come pick as many as you want. You bring Daniel if he can make it. You bring the whole family. This land remembers your brother, even if the house is gone. Some debts can't be repaid, but they can be honored. Maria hugged him then, this stranger who wasn't a stranger at all, and Thomas hugged her back. When she drove away, he stood watching until her car disappeared over the hill. Then he turned back to his land, seeing it differently now. Not just property to protect, but a place where grace had happened, where mercy had taken root like those wild blackberry bushes, spreading sweetness without asking permission, feeding anyone hungry enough to reach out and take it. He thought of his father, gone but still here in every fence post and story. He thought of a sick little boy who grew up to heal others. He thought of berries ripening in the sun, waiting to be gathered, year after year, generous and patient and free.